Oh, it's cold. We're talking about the Sabbath today. So, the Sabbath is something that a lot of people don't understand, and we need to clarify on because there's a lot of false religions like the Seventh day Adventist cult, and they teach things like the Sabbath being necessary for salvation, and they're very specific to it. And same with the World Mission Society Church of God. That's a mouthful of a cult, and it is absolutely disgusting in every possible way that you can skew it. That is the Mother God cult. That is where they teach that there's a Mother God. But that's besides the point. Let's actually get into this. See, the fourth commandment is to honor the Sabbath and keep it holy. What does that mean, and what is the Sabbath? See, God created the entire world in 6 days, and on the seventh day, he rested. Now, the seventh day of the week is called Saturday for us. However, the original terminology in Hebrew was Shabbat, or Sabbath. So, this day off was literally named after their day of the week. Does that mean that we have to observe it on Saturdays? No. See, Jesus gave us wonderful examples where Jesus did things that the Pharisees thought were breaking the Sabbath over and over and over. But Jesus, being unable to sin because he is God, did not ever break the Sabbath. He did not ever violate God's law. And yet, even those people today, like the Seventh day Adventists, they'll claim that Jesus broke the Sabbath. It is so cold in here. See, there was a guy at a pool in a place called Bethesda, and this dude was crippled. He was paralyzed, and he was trying to do this pagan thing where he would go into this specific water that they taught would heal people, and it didn't work. He could never get in because there would always be people who would step on him, get in the way, but no one could ever be healed by this thing because it was a nonsensical pagan superstition. But Jesus went to him one day, and he healed him on the Sabbath. There was a guy whose hand was completely and totally just disfigured and crippled, and Jesus healed him on the Sabbath. We see many, many cases of Jesus healing people on the Sabbath, which would be him working in the eyes of the Pharisees. So the Pharisees always thought he was violating the law, and they wanted him dead as a result of that, as well as him calling himself God. And that is one of the cases where Jesus calls himself God because he says that he is the Lord of the Sabbath. And there is only one Lord of the Sabbath, and that is Yahweh. So if Jesus says that he is Lord over the Sabbath, then oh my goodness, he is calling himself God. And ultimately, that's why they crucified him, is because Jesus kept calling himself by the eternal name of God. So the way that Sabbath works is that we're supposed to have a day of rest. That's it. We're supposed to have a day off of work. We're supposed to work for 6 days, and then we're supposed to rest. So everyone's schedule is going to vary because the world is different, and God knew that. The point is that you need to rest. See, Jesus taught that he did not create man for the Sabbath, but he created Sabbath for man. He created it as a gift that we are commanded to observe, that we are commanded to receive. And that command is to take a day of rest because that is really good for us. That is good for our bodies. That's good for our minds. That's good for every aspect of us. It is a beautiful gift that God would command us to take a day off. Now, some people think like, oh, well, that's the day that you have to worship Jesus, or like you can't go to church on Sunday. Like the Seventh day Adventists, they teach that if you go to church on Sunday, then you will go to hell. And that is one of a few reasons why they are a false religion. That is absolutely heretical. See, the whole point of Sabbath wasn't to publicly worship God on that day. The point of the Sabbath was to take a day of rest. We're supposed to worship Jesus every single day. Not just on Sundays, not just on Saturdays, but according to the Seventh day Adventists, I've heard many make this declaration that if you worship on a Sunday, you will go to hell. But you're supposed to worship every single day, including Sunday, including Saturday. No matter what that day is, you are supposed to be worshiping God with all of your heart, mind, soul, and strength. So why is it that people started to observe the Sabbath on Sunday? Well, initially it happened in the very beginning. We see in the book of Acts and in the book of Revelation and in one of the letters of Paul where they're explaining that they were meeting together on the Lord's Day. The Jews would do things like worship together, worship publicly on Saturdays, on Sabbath. And the Pharisees, the Jewish leaders, were the only ones who were actually supposed to be working that day. But some of the early churches, they were using the synagogues. They were using those places, and they were busy on Saturdays. So the Christians started worshiping in the same places on Sundays. And then it developed that most of the churches, most of the worship was being done in your house. It was done in secret to hide from the Roman government. So literally, your small group that you have in your house, that was the entirety of the church back then in a lot of cases. So in the New Testament, we see them starting to gather together to worship God publicly together on Sundays, the day that Jesus rose from the dead, the day that Jesus conquered death. That is why they started switching it to Sunday. Biblical Christians were actually observing the Sabbath on various days, including Sunday. But regardless, I want you to actually understand that it just means that you need to have a day off. Don't work for 7 days a week. You need to be able to take a day off, a day to rest, a day to relax, a day to recover. So, like, my days off are Sundays and Tuesdays. Granted, I'm making these videos almost every single day. I'm editing these, I'm doing other kinds of work almost every single day. But my actual normal job, I don't do that on Sundays and I don't do that on Tuesdays. Granted, there's been many times in the past where I've had to go into work on a Sunday or on a Tuesday because there was an emergency. And those kind of things for my job is going to be very different than yours. So I played a little game on X where I was letting people guess what my job was, what I actually do for a living. And the winner of that won one of these shirts. And that will be shipping out very soon once I receive the order of all the shirts that I'm going to be selling to you guys. So to the winner, if you're watching this, it's still going to be a few more days. I apologize. I thought the shirts would all be here by now. Oh, and these coffee mugs are also going to be available. They're called C cups. So the handle makes the C, so Christ is Lord. It's awesome. But anyways, my job involves fixing people. So whenever people get injured, that's what I deal with. I'm a muscular injury rehabilitative specialist. I exclusively work on injured people to try to make them not hurt anymore. So if I have someone text me saying that they woke up on a Sunday morning and they're unable to move their neck, I'm happily going to go work on them and I'm happily going to go fix them. I'm happily going to go in on my day off and make it so that they're capable of turning their head again, because that is an agonizing amount of pain that I don't want them to be in. And I think that that would closest resemble healing on the Sabbath, except obviously Jesus is doing something very, very different than what I'm doing. But still, it's for the benefit. It's just like Jesus gives the example of if you have a sheep that falls down a well, is the shepherd not going to go pull him out even if it's on a Sabbath day? We can easily do our jobs, we can easily work, we can easily do that stuff in order to help people. But just remember that the people who are very legalistic about exactly what day is what and why you have to do certain things in a certain way, most of them are very unfamiliar with the Bible and they're just kind of heretics. Most of them are in cults and most of them aren't Christians to begin with, so pay them no mind. Just focus on what the Bible actually teaches and go from there. See, most of the reason why Jesus was doing all the healings and everything, and why he specifically was trying to do most of them on the Sabbath, was to correct people's understanding of the Sabbath. He wasn't violating it, he was showing that what they thought was a violation of it was not a violation of it. So I hope this answered a lot of your questions. If you have any more on Sabbath, let me know. I'm happy to make another video on this. I've been having people ask me to make a video on the Sabbath for literally 4 months. And today's finally the day. So, thank you. I hope this made sense. Go follow me on X. Go support me on Patreon. My store is opening very soon. You'll be able to buy C-Cups, and you'll be able to buy these shirts, and you'll be able to buy hats, stickers, a bunch of stuff. It's going to actually be a pretty hefty launch. So if you want stuff like that, follow along. The very first people that are going to be aware of the store opening is going to be those who are following me on Patreon. Even if you're following me as a free member, you're going to be the first to know. The people who are actually supporting me financially on Patreon, all of them are going to get a hefty discount code so that they can actually save some money whenever they're doing this, because they've been supporting me, and I want to make sure I repay the favor and let them get some cool shirts for less money. But thank you. Follow me on X. Go support me on Patreon. God bless.